Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it's been a while. I've asked David Morgan to come back and join us. David Morgan is the founder of the Morgan Report, and I will put the links below so that you can see it. He's also, we're going to talk about this at the end of this conversation, but he's also doing a documentary called Silver Sunrise, and this is going to be really interesting. So I want to ask David all about that. We'll leave that till the end, David, but great to see you. The last time you and I spoke was pretty much in the middle of the pandemic. It was February 2021, and we're now coming up to October. We're in October 2024. How ridiculous. Don't know where the year's gone. But welcome back, David. Great to see you. You're looking great. You're coming to me from Spokane, Washington. So welcome to Making Money Matter.
Well, Kerry, thanks for having me. It's been a while, as you say, and it seems the older I get, the faster time goes by. But anyway, here we are.
I totally agree with that, but we won't go into ages or how time is going so fast. Because it's been a while, just give our viewers a quick, brief background on who you are.
Sure. I think the easiest thing to do is to go to the website, themorganreport.com, and just go to the About page. And my CV is on there. We call it biography. But basically, I've been interested in money since I was actually a little kid. Started trading stocks at 16. In the US, you have to be 18, but my dad signed a waiver called the Uniform Gift to Minors Act. So I just was fascinated by how the whole money sphere operated. And actually, I went in a different career field. I worked in the aircraft industry on both the white and black programs for a while, but I was always interested in money. I started investing early, as I said, was big in the futures market early in my life. And I gravitated to the metals once I understood how the system worked and how fractional reserve banking works and how a fiat money system over time always goes to its intrinsic value and all that stuff. So they kind of jumbled together as far as being, strictly what I'm doing now. It's been roughly 25 years. About 1999, I started my first website and built it up, started getting on the speaking circuit, on and went. Last thing on the About page at themorganreport.com, if you scroll down, you can ignore my biography. There is a hot link that's a free movie called The Four Horsemen. I
Oh,
think the
yeah.
film's about 11 or 12 years old now. But for anybody that's doubting where we're going or where we've been, you might want to watch that movie again. It's an hour and a half long. Or for someone that's not on board and says, oh, you guys are just conspiracy theorists, nothing's really wrong. Yeah, our politicians are kind of bad, but we're okay. Watch that film, because in that film, it's the Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun. This whole cycle of empires' rise and demise is a repeat cycle over and over and over again. So it really brings a lot of benefit. It has nothing to do with me being in it. I'm just lucky I was asked to be in it. I have a few lines in the movie, but it's not about me. It's about the overall theme. And I think that's worth mentioning. So back to you.
You said something earlier. You said how the system works. David, how does the system work? Because you know what? I talk to a lot of people, and when you understand true money and how the system works, you do have a bit of an awakening, I guess. But there's a lot of people that say they've got no clue. They've got no clue about gold and silver, but they also have no clue about how the system works. I would love to make this a little bit educational as well. So give us your view. How's the system work, David?
Well, that's going to be good. It's a good question, and I'll do it. It's going to be a very broad brush, broad stroke view. It's going to be very, oh, I hate the word dumbed down, but it's going to be elementary.
Good.
My peer group may, plaster me for not being a strict Austrian economist type of thinker. But in plain language, I think the most important thing to understand is how the system works from the beginning is the adage that we teach all of our kids, at least most of us do, and that is you cannot get something for nothing.
Mm.
And yet the whole system is based on getting something for nothing. And how that works is the powers at the top of what I call the money powers, which in the United States is the Federal Reserve Bank, which is very powerful. Not only in the US, it works through basically the World Bank and the BIS, the Bankers Bank, Bank of International Settlements. But basically, they create what we call money at the stroke of a computer keyboard. And what's interesting about this is it isn't the national treasuries of independent sovereign nations. It's this banking cartel at the top of the pyramid that loans money into existence, and they loan it to governments. And then people are so naive that they don't even really understand what that means in some cases. Because when the government borrows money that's created out of nothing and puts it into circulation to get the economy moving, be it, goods and services, raw materials, resources, or whatever. The idea that the government borrowed it, it has to be paid back to the banking cartel. But who's on the hook? A lot of people think, well, the government's taking care of me. The government's providing this. The government's providing that. No, you as a citizen are responsible for paying the debt. The government borrowed it on your behalf. It's as if you had a credit card, someone stole it, and they can run it up as high as they want, and you're on the hook for it. And you call the cops and you say, hey, someone stole my credit card. I've got an account run up of $50,000. I can't pay that back. I make $5,000 a year. What are they doing to me? And the cop says, oh, no, you don't understand. That's the full faith and credit of your owner. Your owner is your government, and you are on the hook for it. They can spend till Kalamazoo comes home. Doesn't matter. Of course, we're at the point now, Kerry, where you and me and everybody that's on the, in this genre, in this domain, in this meme, whatever you want to call it, that knows the truth, knows it's impossible to pay it back.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of the issue. And the bankers don't care about that. I'm pretty adamant about this point. I stand a bit of a maverick on this, saying, what do you mean they don't care about the principal? Because it's the debt that they care about. That's the interest that's generated when they make the loan. Yeah. And it can never be paid back because it's an infinite equation. The money to pay it back never exists until they issue more money. So it gets to the point where usually in a fiat system, they issue so much money that the currency isn't accepted. And people around the world say, well, that'll never happen to the dollar. Maybe not, but certainly it's happened in every fiat system that's ever been recorded in all of monetary history. And if you want to get a good picture of what it looks like, just do a search engine and type currency in the streets of Venezuela. And you'll see currency in the gutter, and people won't bother to pick it up because it doesn't mean anything. So that's the direction we're headed. And the Federal Reserve itself will tell you on their constant dollar that the 1913 dollar, which was when the Fed was issued, so 111 years ago, that dollar is now worth 2 cents. Now, the reason the Fed was put into place by Congress was for monetary stability. So I think if your kid took a 100-point quiz and they came back with 2 out of 100 and laid it on your kitchen table, have a discussion how well they did in that spelling bee, and you saw 2 out of 100, you would consider that to be a miserable failure. And that's where we are. The problem is, or the reason most people aren't even aware of it, is the time factor, 111 years to get there. If it took, 3 months to get 2 out of 100, then people would be obvious. It'd be so obvious the currency failing that fast. But the United States has had the luxury of conning the rest of the world into this game of we could create something for nothing. We'll print up these pieces of paper that look really cool, and you ship us real goods, real services, real hardware, real resources. And the world's caught on to it. The bankers know all of this. The problem is they hide it from the public, and they blame it on us because we're, driving our cars too much or whatever they tell us we're doing wrong. And then they'll come up with a solution, and their solution will be, I think, a digital currency of some type with even more control than we have now. So that's the broad picture, broad brush. There's a lot of details I left out, but I think the most important thing is comes from nothing. You're responsible for paying the debt, not your government. Governments don't do anything except be an intermediary. They're the ones borrowing the money on your behalf. And do you get your fair share when they make roads or whatever? Or let's say they put it in their back pocket, or they go on vacations, or they do what politicians do. I'm not fond of the political class, Kerry, but that's no news to you.
Neither am I. Don't get me started on that one. We'll be here for hours. Thank you for that, because I think it is important. And I know it was a broad brushstroke, but you know what? You've got to start educating people somewhere. And I am passionate on this channel to get people to understand how money works. And by the way, there's also a great series that Mike Maloney did on the history of money. Go watch that, ladies and gentlemen, because that is something. It's a series. Go watch it. It's quite entertaining as well, but it will get you thinking about what's going on in the world today. But what I want to know from you, David, is you spoke about the US dollar. What makes the dollar different in these crazy times where we're printing like drunken sailors and spending like drunken sailors and things are going up? And as you said, since 1913, the US dollar has gone down and is worth 2 out of 100 since 1913. But the dollar is still dominant.
The dollar is the king currency.
Yep.
The way that came about was, well, first of all, I'm going to digress slightly. So if
Okay.
you look at history and you combine it or conjoin it with monetary history, what you find is that he who owns the gold makes the rules, that old adage. So if you go back prior to the United States dollar being the supreme currency, it really was the British pound. It was called the pound sterling, and the sterling was sterling silver, and it was by the pound. And so it was a gold silver standard, really. But when Great Britain basically was a major power in the world, they had most of the precious metals. And then after World War II, the United States had most of the precious metals. And the world was in a disarray, to put it in polite terms. And they met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and they pounded out a new monetary system, which was a dollar standard, but the dollar was redeemable at a fixed value of gold, meaning that you would get 1 ounce of gold for every 35 US dollars. And so really it was a pseudo gold backed currency, and everyone accepted that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the took off, and basically a sound money system. And so things marched along very, very well from, after the war. What was it? I forget. Bretton Woods was 1944, I think,
I'm
somewhere in
pretty
that
sure.
range.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so 54, 64, didn't even go 30 years. It went almost 30 years, but in August 15th, 1971, our promise was called. In other words, France and the UK said, well, if these pieces of paper that I've collected at 35 each equal to an ounce of gold, I want the gold. Here's your paper. Show up. And they sent ships to the harbor in New York, ready to load up the gold and come home. And the Nixon was advised appropriately, not the right thing to do because we reneged on our promises, but he said, I'm temporarily closing the gold window. And that speculators are responsible for all this. So see how government or politicians are always very eager to pass the blame onto the citizenry, never, ever taking blame themselves, or very seldom taking blame. So that started a floating exchange rate. So now nothing was fixed. So instead of every currency being fixed to what the dollar was worth, now they floated. And it was based on the full faith and credit of the United States. Well, yeah, how much they could tax you. So that's what it's based on. We're going to run up the debt. We can't pay it, or maybe we can pay it now, but you're responsible. So time goes on, and we're in the place we are now. And the reason the dollar reigns supreme is because, one, it was gold back. It was as good as gold at one time. So that thought pattern is still there. And it's the biggest creditor in the world because the way a fiat system works, it's based on credit. It means that I can borrow money for whatever purpose, for starting a business, for paying off a loan, for going to school, for furnishing my house. And that credit system is based on usury and interest rate. So this is, again, coming back to our original, talk there at the very start about how do you pay back the debt? And the answer is you don't. You have to continually create new money to pay off the interest on the money that was originally loaned. So the system goes like that. And you say, well, why is the dollar so strong? One is because it's the most liquid and most trusted currency. I mean, and I'm going to try to really make this point strong. But people say, well, how can it be so strong when, they're printing so much? And the answer to that is, and so let me digress a minute. So if you're in Argentina with a hyperinflation, Venezuela with hyperinflation, I've got several in my second book, The Silver Manifesto, and these are all modern times. I forget, there's like 8 countries in there, and they all basically had their currency fail. And in a lot of those countries, they use gold and silver, but they also use U.S. greenbacks. They use Federal Reserve notes. 60% of the printed money out of the United States Treasury is in foreign countries. Because when
How
you're in
much?
Argentina,
60%?
60%.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's why you see more $100 bills overseas than you see in the U.S. because they trust them, especially on what we call the black market, which is really the free market. So we have an exchange rate in Argentina, for example, for what the peso rate is to the US dollar. And it's one rate at the bank and it's one rate on the street. And people will save in those pieces of paper because it's much more stable. So coming back to the bigger picture, it's like, well, why is the dollar strong versus all these other currencies? And it's not a function of we have more resources or we have more technology or the rule of law that might play into it slightly. The reason is as fast as we're printing, most of these other countries are printing faster. So it's a question of who's printing the slowest, and it's us. Yeah, so that's the answer, which most people don't even get that concept. But that's how it works. And again, I'm being a bit of a broad brush. You can say, well, David,
Yeah,
that's not
that's fine because
the Swiss franc isn't doing it. I don't want to go in the currency regime. To me, people ask me very often, well, what currency should I be in to protect myself when this whole, system unravels? And they think, well, the Canadian dollar, they have natural resources. Swiss franc is backed by gold. It's not. There is no, the currency is gold. That's it. Gold and silver. Silver, particularly in my view, but both. And no, there is no favorite currency. Now, people ask about the BRICS and the new currency they're going to issue and all that. I'm not as a lot. First of all, I think they have every right to mitigate themselves from the U.S. dollar. I think I'm a free market thinker. I'm for freedom. For freedom for all countries, nationalities, you name it. But I don't think that the BRICS really can pull off what other people have talked about and written about, spoken about, because they don't have the debt markets. Remember, if the BRICS come up with a unified currency, right now they're just trading amongst themselves in their own national currencies. But if they issued a gold backed by 40% currency, they still have a dollar debt they've got to pay back.
correct.
No one ever talks about
it. No. And that's a very interesting comment that they've still got a dollar debt to pay back. One of the things that you said earlier was, the US dollar is the most liquid, it's the most trusted until it isn't. My question to you is, I think that this central bank digital currency, in their view, could potentially solve a lot of issues because, as you said before, it's got a bit more control from them, no control for us. And I think it could be global. How confident, or confidence is probably the wrong word, but do you think it's coming in, central bank digital currencies, or as they call them, CBDCs?
Well, I'll say this. I don't know if it will come in or not. I know that's what they want.
Yeah.
I've said this on several interviews, but this is new and it doesn't, facts bear repeating. I mean, it's a fundamental that we have to get into the public's, arena so that they understand it. But Mark Carney, when he was Bank of England, he no longer is, but he made 3 speeches. He made one to the UN, one at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is where the Fed meets, and one to the Bank of England. And the speech was basically identical. And what he said was the new system will be a CBDC, central bank digital currency, in MMT, modern money theory, which means backed by absolutely nothing, and that they will have complete control of it. And he implied it would be a cashless society. So that's what they want. So I have little doubt on what they want. And that's been somewhat changed. This is my passion. This is what I study, not 24/7, about 23/7. But so now it looks as if they may be shifting to, well, governments around the world are mistrusted. It's not just the United States, the Australians, I mean, most of Europe, the Canadians. I mean, a lot of my friends are in Canada. They just, they can't believe what's going on in the country. But the point is that it's a little more palatable for some people to obfuscate it. But, well, it won't be the nasty government issuing a CBDC. Your friendly local banker will issue the CBDC. It's a private bank. We're back to the private sector. Of course, they're in bed with all the political class, and we know that, but some people don't know that. So that's just a bit of a fine point, Kerry, but I think it needs to be made because, you know, what David said, to be the government. But the idea is, yeah. And then they want total control. I mean, it depends on your worldview, but if you're even a bit biblical and maybe not a religious person or even believe in the Bible, the words are in there that you'll have to take some type of a mark to buy or sell. And they're want to get all the unbanked, that 1.4 billion people that don't have a bank account, into the system. And they want to make sure it's you. And what is your ID? The real ID is your DNA. Your DNA is your identification. And so that's why this alt character's running around with that globe where you put your iris in, because an iris is like a fingerprint. It's unique to you. And issuing this little digital ID where you can get some cryptocurrency and be one of the club. And so it frightens me a great deal. I mean, if you don't have free speech, a lot of freedoms, but really, if they control the money, and they have for years, that's a lot of control. And if they put it into the next level of control where there is no cash, so there's no anonymity at all. I mean, if you do a garage sale, it's got to be done digitally. So that's all tax at point of sale and that type of thing. So it frightens me.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be harder to implement. I just want to give pause here that I've thought about this a great deal. I read other people's work. I just ordered a new book about an hour ago before this. It's called Digital Currency, written by a guy from Cato. Those guys are pretty smart.
What's the book called? We love on this channel.
I think it's called Digital Currency. I just bought it.
Okay.
It's one of the guys from the Cato Institute. And so where it goes, we don't know for sure, but I do think it'll be harder to implement than they think. Although they have the ability to, you know, cause problems in the economy, you know, like a depression, for example. And, you know, if you can't afford food, and they go to a digital system and they reward you by, you know, the first 30 days, you get an extra $1,000 in a chicken. I mean, I'm being facetious slightly. There'll be motivation. So again, it's frightening, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean there won't be resistance. I think a lot of people will resist. And I do think that I think they
I'm going to call you on that, David, because I don't think people will resist. I mean, down here in Australia, it's very interesting during the issue that we had over the last few years. I never like to say the word just in case I get deplatformed, but you know what I'm talking about, and all of you out there know what I'm talking about. At one point, they were saying, you know, don't handle cash because it could be contaminated, and it was really quite interesting. Excuse me. How compliant we were down here. And of course, the next generation, and I often say this is the worst thing that's happened to us, this little baby, they just go tap, tap, tap away. And they don't have cash. I always say to people, I'll say to all of you out there, if you want to know where your money is going, stop using your phone and start using physical cash, because quite frankly, when you see it and it's not there anymore, then you understand where it's going. But if you just tap, you've got no idea. But my question to you, David, is, you know, people seem to be very compliant. So I think that they won't be too difficult to get this in.
It remains to be determined. I won't argue with the Kerry. You make a very salient point. We don't know. I think I'd like to further what my side of the, I won't say argument, discussion, is that, you know, you got 1.4 billion people that are unbanked. They don't even know what a bank is. They don't care, you know?
Yeah.
And so how do you get to them? Now, these are people that are earning, you know, $2 a day or $3 a day. Do the bankers really care about them? Hell no, on a monetary perspective, but they don't want an underground economy either. So they want them in the system, regardless of how little they make, just so that they can watch it. But I think it'd be a lot harder. When I did a lecture on basically the topic we're on right now, and I looked it up, and I was surprised at how many, you know, how big a population is unbanked. So it's gonna be hard to get. The other part that no one ever really talks about, and I can't say much about it because I don't think anyone has an answer, but what if they fail? What if something happens before they can implement the CBDC? a major cyber attack, a money center bank that,
Yeah.
freezes up, a stock market that goes down so fast they pull the circuit breaker, let it ride for 2 hours, push it back in, it goes down limit again, they pull it out and it goes down limit again. So they close all the markets for 2 weeks. I mean, all this stuff sounds almost science fiction, but in this leveraged, geared up market that has nothing close to reality, when you're this far away from reality, it doesn't take much for pulling that one pin out of the Jenga statue for this thing to start falling down and falling down rapidly. I'm not predicting that, but it's at the tail end of the curve. But something that was 0.001% is now 0.01%. So it's gone up a factor of 100 at the tail end of the curve. I hope I'm making sense, at least the math people. What I'm saying is it's still a very remote possibility, but it's much less remote than it was 10 years ago.
All right, let's go into something that you and I know and love, and that is real money, which is precious metals, which is gold and silver. As I talk to you now in the start of October, I find it really interesting. Gold hitting all-time highs. Silver is coming up as well. That's real money, but the percentage of people that actually even care about it is minuscule. Why is that, do you think, David?
I think it's under education. I mean, when I went through public school before university, and I went to a state school for university. It wasn't my master's was somewhat a private school. I don't want to go to my schooling, but I was given a pretty classical education. I mean, we really learned about the Constitution of the United States and, how the country was founded. And then, started getting into the Constitution and was it Article 10, Section 8, nothing but gold and silver will be, used as money in the States. And so I asked a question to my teacher, well, why is that? And I found out for the first time, Carrie, I got a good dissertation in the weather patterns because it snowed inside. She snowed me. She didn't give me an answer at all, but because she didn't know. But I'm only an eighth grader, and so I started digging in. That was in fact one of the, I don't know, turning points, but one of those little pushes that I got. Well, wait a minute, she doesn't know. I'm going to find out. And the point being is that the system doesn't want people to know what reality is. They want them under their subjugation. The easiest way to put people in prison is to make sure that they believe they're free and put them on a monetary basis where everybody's struggling for the almighty dollar, the Aussie dollar, the Canadian dollar, the real, the Swiss franc, the euro, whatever the heck it is. And they're so doggone busy making a living that they don't have time to look at this stuff.
Right.
And if they catch it on the periphery, they might say, oh, well, they've heard, the talking heads on the financial networks say, well, somebody's got to be a banker. Yeah, we got to have a bank, don't we? Well, maybe we do. It should be a public utility at the very least, but beyond, going down that road any further, we're in a system that basically controls us, even though we don't know it. And I think the easiest way, and I think a lot of average people, not average, but people that are too busy to really look into this stuff can now see it because the political class is bought and paid for. And they realize that there's a direct tie in a lot of cases to the banking system and who's winning elections, who's passing laws, whatever. I laugh at the legislative body, the Congress in the United States, and it's sad laughter because a lot of these bills are written by lobbyists, but some Congress critter puts him or her name on it and says, I'm submitting this bill. No, their name's on it, but they didn't write it. Some lobbyist group wrote it for them. Yeah. And they bought and paid for this political Congress critter, and they get what they want. I mean, we're living in a corptocracy. We're living where the corporations run. And that was pointed out years ago in the movie Network. I don't know if you remember that movie, Carrie, but that anchor man goes off and he just says, there is no Russia. There's no China. There's no United States. All there is AT&T, 3M. Apple wasn't there then, but Apple, Tesla, and he goes, it's a corporation. These are all multinationals running the world, not these countries. And he was right, but very few people understood that wasn't just a metaphor or an analogy. It really was the way the world's worked for a long time. These multinationals want profit. They don't care, much about what jurisdiction they're in. They're globalists. They think on a global way. And so anyway, I've maybe moved down the road.
So let me pull it back to
reel me back
where we are now, because I think most of my audience out there are looking for answers as to what they can do, and most of them don't understand real money versus the digits on their screen, if you like. So what are you seeing from a macro point of view at the moment, David Morgan? What are you seeing out there? Because I'm trying to get people, not try, I always say to people, never use the word try. I want people to understand, because ultimately this channel, Making Money Matter, that's what it's all about. I want them to make money matter and to understand what is true money and true wealth. But from a macro point of view, what are you seeing?
Well, real money is silver and gold. And when you invest, I just listened to one of my friends give a YouTube talk, and he said, "You never invested silver and gold." No. I don't really care what word you use, but what you're really doing is you're saving, and your saving over time is static, meaning that that ounce of gold that you saved will be just as valuable 5 months, 5 years, or 50 years, or 500 years from the time you saved it. Now, there are variables in there. Sometimes gold gets undervalued. Sometimes it gets overvalued. But generally speaking, it's a steady eddy. But people don't think of it as a constant. They think of dollars as a constant. So they say, well, I've got an ounce of gold and now it's worth, what's it in Aussie dollars? I don't even
know. 3,800, 3,800 last time I looked. I'll double check right now. But yeah, because the Aussie dollar has gone up a little bit. So in US dollars, it's, as I speak to you right now, in US dollars, it's up $13 to 2,670 as we speak. But in Australian dollars, 3,880, it's down 15. Why? Because the currency against the US dollar has got stronger. The Australian currency is getting stronger. The US dollar gold has gone up, but or what you can look at it is you can go, the US dollar has come back a little bit. The Australian dollar's got a bit stronger. It's really interesting when you look at it that way.
Yeah, because the dollar changes, the gold piece doesn't. That ounce of gold that you have in your safe or your pocket or whatever is the same mass anywhere in the universe forever. It's as constant as it can be. Yeah. So what changes? It's the value of the currency against it. But people don't think that way. They think the currency is the constant. And I bought it at 1,400 Aussie dollars, and now it's at 3,800. Boy, I'm making a lot of money. No, you've saved your butt because you have the same amount of purchasing power. So when you got to buy the car or groceries or pay for a doctor bill or whatever, you've got the money to do it because you saved in money, not in fiat.
And this is this is so important, this point, David. I'm going to reiterate it. This is what people need to understand, that when you are saving in real money, the gold and the silver, you're protecting your purchasing power from those that will continue to print based on nothing, which means that your purchasing power is being eroded. So it is not gold and silver going up. It's your funny money, your currency, which is being devalued almost on a daily basis. Sorry, David.
No, I mean, the fundamentals are so important. And, if we just help one more person because they heard our discussion, as far as I'm concerned, that's a big win. Because, we're in it together. It's we the people against the power elite. The power elite are run by the money masters, I call them. And that's what it is. I mean, and there are exceptions here and there. I mean, if you're Amish or you're, living in the outback or whatever. But honestly, for the major majority of the world, we are under their control. We don't even know. And there aren't too many ways to escape. I want to make something clear. I brought it up here recently in the last year or so. And I'm really, I'm considered a gold bug. You call me whatever you want. I really could care less. but I'm really not a gold bug, and I'm not necessarily a silver bug, although that term probably applies better. But what I really think is important for people to know is that a gold only standard is not my choice, because there's a series of papers, and I bring this up almost every lecture. And thanks for giving me the free market of ideas, Carrie. But there's 3 papers written by this guy. Can't pronounce his last name. It's something like TJAUA or something. But it's the first series is called Gold Standard equals Fiat in Disguise. And what he makes a very clear argument about is once you go to a gold only standard, there's no measure of gold except what you just said, Carrie. It's the amount of papers that can be inflated to infinity. So you don't really have a reference. Unless you can refer to gold in terms of ounces of silver, you really don't have a metallic standard that works. So his argument is, and mine's always gut level felt this way until I reread his papers, that we really need a bimetallic standard. And that's actually been proven throughout monetary history. Because once you go from a silver gold standard to a gold only standard, then it morphs into a fiat standard.
Right.
And they get the gold because they can print as much paper as they want. You think the bankers care if gold's 2,600 or 26,000? Not really. I mean, all they do is they hit one more zero on the keyboard. What's that take? 2 milliseconds? I mean,
Yeah.
they don't care.
Yeah. All right. So right now, I spoke, gold is hitting all-time highs. I speak to people, Dave, and they're like, oh, and even silver, like, I'm just trying to pay my bills. I'm not going to buy any gold or silver because I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I always say to them, I guarantee you've got a leaky bucket somewhere. We can squeeze a little bit, just even if it's a silver coin, do something to protect the future, not wealth, but just your basic future, because this is not going to get any better. And in speaking with David Hunter just a couple of days ago, it's his view. He's the contrarian investor. I love contrarian. It's, when people are always looking left, start looking right. His view was that the US government will get itself into trouble again. I mean, they've pulled back interest rates by 50 basis points. That's not going to solve the problem. They will have to print again. And he's saying when they turn those printing presses on, it's going to get crazy. And because of that, inflation will rear its ugly head again to percentage points that will be slightly eye-watering. Your views? They going to print like crazy?
Yeah, I thought it through. I don't have an answer. I think he's correct. I mean, the inflation problem is more psychology than anything else. And I can say that with authority because I lived through it. I was just starting in the workforce. In fact, my first paycheck was bigger than I had contracted for. I'd signed a dotted line for a degreed engineer, aeronautical engineer, at $6 an hour, Carrie. $6 an hour.
Oof. Oof.
And I get my first paycheck and it's like $6.28 an hour. And I'm just a kid. I'm like, oh my God, something's wrong, And I take it to my boss. I said, I think something's wrong. He goes, what's wrong? I go, I got my paycheck here and they paid me too much. He goes, what do you mean? I go, I signed the contract for $6. It's like 6.28. And he goes, see this over here? And I said, yeah. It says COLA. And I said, yeah. And I'm, I don't want to make a mistake. I'm 2 weeks into the job. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to say too much. I want to say too little. I'm just really uptight. And I like, yeah, what's that mean? And he goes, oh, that's a cost of living adjustment.
Oh.
Because inflation is so high, we had to move your wages up by 28 cents for the inflation. And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
That's what they're doing down here, David, at the moment. The government's just turned around and said, well, we're going to give you all a $300 rebate on your electricity. Electricity prices are a bit high. So, we're the good guys. Here's some paper to help you offset the cost.
Yeah. Well, where we're going, I don't know if Mr. Hunter went into this with you or not, but and I wish I had the quote, but the idea is that one of the biggest demises of the human species is their inability to understand an exponential function. And you can look that up on the internet, but an exponential function is commonly talked about in layman's terms as the hockey stick
Oh, yeah.
or parabolic move.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when, it took 200 years to get to $1 trillion in debt. And now we're getting in the US $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. That's an exponential function. What took 200 years now takes place in 100 days. And so you're starting to hit that hockey stick and going up and up and up. Once you go parabolic, and I traded futures for a living for a while, as you probably
You're
recall.
getting darker. I'm just letting you know, David, you're getting darker and darker
Yeah,
now.
I'm going to have to
Can you put
turn
a
the
light
light
on
on.
for us?
Probably black out face even more.
There we go. That's
And,
better.
and so once you hit the exponential function, it doesn't last much longer.
Oh,
And unfortunately, we're hitting out with the US dollar. We're not there yet, but well, if you look at a chart, we are just starting to travel. But you don't know if, you don't know. You don't know if it's good for 10 days, 10 months. I don't think it's 10 years. I really believe, Kerry, that they have to implement the new system within the next 2-3 years at the most. If they don't, the system will unravel on its own terms. And that's where some nation state sells all the bonds, it crashes the bond market. A money center bank freezes up, a cyber attack, everything I mentioned in the beginning. And all those could be done by the bankers themselves, just to what's called a false flag, to put out, oh my goodness, it wasn't our fault. Those nasties, fill in the blank, whatever country you don't like today, fill it in. And they did it to us. We're just providing a service to the public. We're doing God's work. We're printing money to help society. And geez, well, it's really lucky we thought something like this might happen. Here's what our solution is: sign up, go to your nearest post office, get your DNA scan, and get a $3,000 bonus by getting your new implemented digital currency. However they do it.
And that's what they'll do, and people will sign up for it probably. Look, I do want to talk about something before we finish up, David, because it's been fascinating. And let's not leave it 3 years, okay?
Yeah, no,
3-4
no, it's
years
great
away.
catching up, and it's always a good interview. You think you just ask great questions, in my opinion. And my main purpose at this age is just to try to help as many people as I can. I mean, it's always
Absolutely.
been that way, but even more so. It's like, I mean, I'm in the winter years of my life. I still got my health back and I feel good, but the message is clear. And no one's I heard this one, digressing a bit, Carrie, but it made me laugh every time I think about it. I laugh again. But you're an adult when the cavalry isn't coming to the rescue. When the cavalry isn't coming to the rescue, you're an adult.
Speaking cavalry, make sure you watch the it's the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Is that it?
Well, it's the Four Horsemen film.
Just the Four Horsemen film. Watch that. It's on the David. I'll put the link below for all of this, ladies and gentlemen. But before we go, you're also doing a documentary. I mentioned this right at the start.
Yep.
Called Silver Sunrise. David's written books about silver. And I know a lot of you out there are very interested in silver. When is this doc? What's it about? Why'd you do it?
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Sure.
All right.
If you're technologically advanced enough to be able to share your screen, let's.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So I'm doing this documentary with others. It's called Silver Sunrise, but the subtitle is what's important: breaking free from the stress, fear, and control of money. And the synopsis you can read delves into that, the control of money and what it exerts over our lives, talks about the love-hate relationship that we have with money, the evolution of money from paper to debt to electrons to central bank digital currencies. In short, Silver Sunrise sheds lights on the manipulation of money by governments and banking cartels, hell-bent on exploiting civilization with endless debt, perpetual wars, and unjust enrichment. Some of the people that are in this movie: Foster Gamble, a friend of mine I met at Acapulco, did the Thrive movies. He did those 2 Thrive movies. The master of many, G.
And by
Edward
the way,
Griffin.
ladies and gentlemen, sorry to interrupt you, David, but G. Edward Griffin, if you have not read his book, which is called, remind me again. Oh, the creature from Jekyll, the creature
from Jekyll Island.
It's all about where the Federal Reserve started, how it started, etc. Go get that book, ladies and gentlemen. It's really important. J. Edward Griffin, absolute legend.
So all these people, and there's these trailers up here. So
There he is.
there's Ed, there's Foster Gamble, Ron Paul,
Oh,
Ellen
wow.
Brown, Dr. Vieira, which is probably the best constitutional mind in the U.S. in my opinion. Yours truly, Mark Passio, Larkin Rose. We
Wow.
only have 2 more interviews to do. This gentleman, the producer, James Yeager, has done Mullen Labe, Midnight Ride, mainstream, and his first film was called Fiat Empire. And Fiat Empire, Kerry, got the Tully Award, which doesn't mean a lot to me because I'm not a movie guy. I watch them. I don't know much about the industry, but it's a pretty prestigious award for a documentary type film. And when he and I connected, and I told him, this is kind of I'm going to call it my swan song, but it's probably the last thing I'll do. I decided not to write any more books people don't read. I think a movie is a lot more widespread, plus people watch it together and they discuss it. You don't really read a book together. So I decided to do this. Anyway, he said, well, let's do Fiat Empire 2. And I said, I really don't want that kind of a vibe. I want the more spiritual side of money and why we have power and why should we give them our power? Because they control us for the most part with money. There's a few monetary monks out there that money doesn't really mean that much to, but most of us, can be used as leverage. And so he caught it, when we went through kind of the outline of what I wanted the money to look like and what the main takeaways were. So
Scroll up
we
to the
have
top
like
again for us. Just
2 more
scroll up.
interviews to do,
Okay.
and that's it.
And where can people find this? Do they just go to a
Yeah,
website?
go to the website. It's called silversunrise.tv.
Okay.
So if you just type in silversunrise.tv, you will, get all
Some
this
of the
stuff.
trailers. And when's it coming out?
We hope to have it about Christmas, Carrie. I mean, it depends if we get 2 more interviews done or not. We're taking donations. I funded a lot of it myself, but and there's other things on this donation page that you don't have to donate. This is James himself. These are some trailers from other movies that he has done, so you can kind of get a look at the kind of message that he sends out with these documentaries that he produces. And I'm just extremely lucky in a way that I was connected to him, but because he's done this so many times, he's made 10 films. So this will
Okay.
be.
Well,
So I'm really done. Thank you for giving me the time to explain that. But it's, how passionate I am. You've met me in person. What you see is what you get. But this is sort of like almost a passion with some icing on top, because I really think this could be one of those things that, from that 1% of people that buy gold, it loses to 2%. I'm not saying it's about me, but I think if the message gets out, then you could get a real, re-education of what's really going on.
all right. Well, it's been very educational conversation with you, David, and I do appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Gold and silver is money. Everything else is credit. And the credit bubble is here. It's expanding. The hockey stick, as David said, the exponential function, that's the hockey stick approach. $1 trillion before, and now it's $1 trillion every 100 days, and it's probably going to shorten in time. The debt bubble, it's going up and away. I always want you guys to protect yourself. But once again, thanks so much for watching us on Making Money Matter. David Morgan, thanks so much for coming on board today.